Howdy, with this video, I want to go over the sample explication. It's going to be on a Robert Frost poem, one that you don't get to choose, but hopefully it'll help you see how the poetry explication is going to work. And this is sample explications right here under material for Essay 2, and you can read that at your leisure there. Before we get too far, let me read the poem first, then we'll look at the sample essay on it. Hopefully you've probably heard this poem once or twice before in your life, but if not, it's a good poem by Robert Frost. It's called The Road Not Taken. Two roads diverged in the yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler. Long I stood as long and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other as just as fair and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear, though as for that the passing there had worn them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay, and leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in the wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Or difference. I want to make that difference rhyme with him, sir. And a lot of people interpret this poem as, hey, I took the road less traveled, that's why I was more successful, or it turned out the way I did. What this explication is going to get into a little bit is kind of pointing out that both of these roads, they were just as fair. You know, there's one didn't look any different than the other one. The passing there had worn them really about the same. They equally lay. Um, and really, sometimes in life we're looking at two paths. We have to choose a path, and we're not sure where it's going to lead to or anything, and we just pick one and go. And that might be what this poem's really about, is how we kind of justify what we did later on in life, and pretended like we took the road less traveled or something. When really, when we were trying to make the decision about which road to travel, they looked absolutely the same. But to look at sample explication, again, hopefully you watched YouTube video number 11, where I kind of went over what an explication is and the requirements. But you're going to see this put into practice. There's not going to be any biography about Robert Frost and how he was at Kennedy's inauguration or all this stuff. We're going to stay focused on the poem and just go line by line or stanza by stanza through the poem. This explication is going to go stanza by stanza, which again is those group of lines. There are four stanzas, 5 lines each in that poem. And again, no big introduction. No, Robert Frost is the greatest poet ever. Yada yada yada. We don't care. We just want to know what you're seeing, or what this writer's seeing within the poem. So in the first stanza of his poem, "The Road Not Taken," Robert Frost presents a scene familiar to all people through the persona of a traveler. Our traveler uses first-person narration to present us with the metaphor of two roads diverging in a yellow wood, a metaphor that represents the proverbial fork in the road we all encounter when making a life decision. All right, and you kind of see that's how your explication should start. Whichever one of those 8 poems you're going to choose, start with the first line and get into it. You want to use frequent quotes to support what you're saying and to keep the reader focused on where you're at within the poem. And you're going to have to use the brackets and the ellipses to kind of make sure the quotes are making grammatical sense with the rest of the sentence. So again, a lot of this explication is a kind of a sentence structure exercise and an exercise in expanding on your ideas. And you kind of see I'm using the terms there. You don't have to define the terms when you use them, but you definitely want to make sure they're in there. Again, that shouldn't be too hard to do once you really get into it. I'm going to go line by line through this stanza. In lines 2 and 3, we find that our traveler must make a choice and cannot remain static. I could not travel both and be one traveler. The ellipses show I ended the quote a little before the end of the line there. And also notice I'm citing using line numbers. We're not using page numbers anymore. The page number will be, if there is one, it'll be on the works cited page. So when you see the 1 here, I'm quoting from line 1. Here, I'm quoting from lines 2 and 3. You can do the citation in the introduction to the quote, or you can do it at the end of the quote. The persona's point suggests that even if we decide not to choose, we're still heading down a path. If we choose not to marry, we've made a choice. If we choose not to have children, we've made a choice. Any life traveler must move forward in some direction. like you all have, right? They said, what's your major? You had to make a choice, right? In addition, the narrator's observation of the color yellow for the wood indicates the traveler in counting this decision must use caution. Again, when you hit color within a poem, generally pretty important. When you get like a woman with black balloons, what do black balloons generally signify in our culture? If you haven't had your 40th or 50th birthday party, maybe you don't know yet. But generally, they're kind of used to make fun of somebody who's coming close to death, which is one of the major themes in that poem. But make sure you slow down, and you want to kind of expand on what's happening in the poem. When you hit a color, what's that color mean? Why did the poet choose that particular color at that particular point within the poem? The color yellow shows us that the traveler faces an important decision. Yet the color yellow also personifies the sense of aging. Old skin's yellow, old paper is yellow, and old leaves in a wood are yellow. With the caution of the yellow in mind, a traveler does not make a hasty decision. However, a traveler can't spend too much time vacillating between choices. The first stanza ends with the traveler peering down one of the roads to where it bent in the undergrowth. Because the traveler cannot see the future results of his possible journey down the first path, be careful with sexist pronouns there. If you're going to use a particular gender, make sure you justify that within your explication. Um, watch out for things like that. There's no reason to think that the traveler is a he within the context of this poem. In other words, because the traveler cannot see the future results of his or her possible journey down the first path, the reader gains a sense of ambivalence regarding the traveler's choice. Which road will he choose, or he or she choose? So if I was going to use a he, I'd probably have to justify that earlier in my explication, saying why I thought the narrator was a he. Now think about this, I don't really have a reason for that. But you can kind of see how it's working. You want to work in these short quotes to keep us focused on where you're at within the poem. Especially kind of went off on this thing about the color yellow, so you kind of want to bring the reader back into the poem. You want to make sure that they make grammatical sense. You might have to use the ellipses and the brackets. Brackets show a change to a quote. Ellipses show an omission to a quote. But then we're going to go into the next stanza. I'm not going to read this whole thing to you. You can kind of see how this is working. And you can see again the citations by line number. And you, particularly if it's a short poem like this, you generally don't want to skip lines. You want to make sure you touch it on every line. If you get a short poem like this be the simile, you really can't skip lines, or you're just going to come up short on the word count. So again, the idea is not that I summarize what the stanza means. I'm taking the stanza and kind of unfolding it and showing you the different meanings that are arising out of what I'm seeing. And again, it's not easy. But you can read this. One other thing, when you go from one line to the next in a short quote, you should have this slash here. That shows the line break. If you do a long quote, it should look like the original, tabbed over, just like any other long quote. But you'll use the original line breaks for that long quote, 4 more lines. But yeah, like I said, I'm not going to read this whole thing to you. You can read faster than I can talk. But be sure and take a look at this sample essay. It's doing a good job, basically, of taking the reader through the poem. When you get towards the end, you might come back and talk about the title or something if it's relevant. And this one was. We get to the end of the poem, and it's like, well, why did he name the poem "The Road Not Taken" instead of "The Road Less Traveled" or something like that? But it'll make y'all dizzy scrolling like that. But that's kind of how the explication should work. It's not easy all the time to get those quotes in there. Keep the reader focused on the poem, and while you're expanding on what you're seeing in the poem. But hopefully that helps a little bit. As always, be sure and ask me questions if you have any. But we'll talk to you later. Bye bye.